because we're going to speak a little more about this envy thing. But look at Genesis 50, verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph bears a grudge? Oh my God. What if what if Israel bears a grudge for how the Gentiles have treated her? What if she bears a grudge? Oh my God. Against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him. What if Israel said, I'm not sharing anything else with the nations? What if she holds a grudge? Where would we be? So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father charged before he died, said, he's like, just in case, father not here, but I remember he said this, and I know you honor father, so they honor him now. Please forgive. There's coming a day when the nations will come and say, please forgive. Please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. Yes, nations of the world, you did us wrong in how you dealt with us. You put us in that pit. But you could stop the dreamer temporarily, but the dream lives on. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Oh, okay, we elevating ourselves here now. We are servants just like you know. So you can't hold a grudge. 2,000 years of murder, anti-Semitism, don't hold a grudge. That's a small thing. Let's get on. Yeah, right. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. This is the heart that God is looking for from Israel. That when the Gentiles come and speak that way because of insecurity now begin to set in, because the tables turn and regard that you're no longer arrogant, you're humbled. Tables have turned and you recognize, oh my God, it's like Haman in the presence of Esther, recognize how so quickly the tables turn. And we go in treat, Esther, save me. Of course, you know the story, what played out. All right, but this is going to happen, brethren, and in the twinkle of an eye, scales will drop off the eyes of Gentiles and they would see. And scales will drop off the eyes of Israel and you would see too. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. Now you're acknowledging brothers of Joseph and nations, right? We're your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but Elohim meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. So all 12 are chosen, but Joseph remained uniquely chosen and the source of double portion blessing to the rest. Are you seeing that? Joseph, all chosen, all 12 sons chosen, but Joseph is uniquely chosen. Can we allow Israel to be uniquely chosen without being envious? Why do we feel we have to put him into a pit where there's no water? Because we are envious. We were not chosen. We're putting the finger on replacement theology and supersessionism. It is envy. Why was Yeshua delivered over to Pilate? Because of envy. Why is the Gentiles raging against Israel? Because of envy. So all future disciples chosen, yet we see the 12 are unique. Can you allow the 12 disciples and apostles to be unique? That they have the grace to do what we would have liked to do, what we have the potential to do, but they are elite. They have been chosen. They walked with the Master. They saw him resurrected. Allow them that place to be chosen. Take the lower place and wait to be called up higher. Rebuke envy and arrogance. Allow the 12 to have that chosen spot without trying to say, well, we are God's servants too, you know. Allow people to be chosen. You see, oh my God, let me just jump ahead. But this is a mistake of replacement theology, the mistaken view that since the church is now the new elect, we are the new elect, you see. So Israel is no longer the elect. Since we are the new elect, then Israel is no longer the elect. And Jews who accept Yeshua are no longer Jews. Oh my God. What did we do? we tried to kill Joseph. The perpetual enmity, the envy of Edom, the envy of Esau against Jacob, the envy of Ishmael against Isaac. It's right there, and it's deep within the heart of all created beings. Because there's an envy that is working out between Judah and Ephraim. Envy. One envy and harass. Envy and it's a work of the flesh. But we see it manifested in the teaching and the posture and arrogance of an envious, boastful Gentile church. But God is helping us to see something. The Jews often had difficulty to accept that God is choosing a remnant from the nation. Like, what? You've chosen us. You're telling me you are choosing them too? You could see the struggle that Israel has to accept that. So there's a term that I learned, it's called zero sum. It is denoting a situation in which whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. Zero sum, it denotes a situation in which whatever is gained by one side is lost by the other. So if Jews have gained it, then Christians have lost. If Christians have gained it, then Jews is lost. It's a zero sum. And if you favor one, then have to be the rejection of the other. But God doesn't work by those rules. That's man's rules. Don't you know the vastness of our Father? That he can have blessings to bless all his children without any one of them being envious? Don't you know the magnificent? Don't you know the omnipresence? The omniscient. Don't you know how great our God is? Your view of God is too limited to think that you have to envy Israel or envy someone else, because your view of God is too small. It's narrow. You're looking through a lattice. You can't bear God being generous, even with the person that comes in the last moment. Because your heart, our heart, is deceitful, wicked, and envious, all for the blessing of not being envious. And so we are beginning to recognize that reconciliation means overcoming envy. To reconcile with Joseph and the brothers, they had to overcome the envy. The nations have to overcome the envy of not being chosen. And we have to overcome the zero-sum mentality. The zero-sum mentality has to be overcome. God doesn't operate by that. So reconciliation between Israel and the nation is tied to that reconciliation between Yeshua and his people. Unless he's reconciled to the people of Israel, and he is the Jewish Messiah of Israel, then how can he be a light to the nation? If he's not the Messiah of Israel, how can he be the Savior of the nations? That's why I speak against the cosmic Christ that removes Yeshua from his Jewishness. It makes him universal. Well, all are we. And it minimizes. It's the zero-sum mentality. And God is raging against that. He sent his son as a Jew, remember that? He providentially sent his son in a Jewish womb. And we have to deal with that. And so even though Israel and the Kahal, which is what we should really be calling, not church, the Kahal, the congregation, and we recognize that's congregation assembly of Israel. That's the term that we should be really using, the Kahal, K-A-H-A-L. Even though Israel and the Kahal, all right, from among the Gentiles, they're still chosen, despite wanderings and unbelief. Despite Israel's wanderings and unbelief, still chosen. Because God remains faithful. Even if some of us become unfaithful, that doesn't change God's overall plan. So we need to recognize now that since we are part of the chosen, whether Jew or Gentile, we need to ask, what am I chosen for? And we need to express that gratitude to God for choosing us and seek to be a blessing. Now that we are chosen, we want to remain faithful. So go with me to Revelation chapter 12. Now that we're chosen, we want to remain faithful to God because we're now getting it. It's now leaking into our conscious mind that God foreknew God predetermined our destiny and where we would live and in what family and what circumstances, that you and I would be able to recognize his call and be justified so that we can be glorified. Revelation chapter 12, we begin to see. Now remember, we just read Genesis chapter 12. In you shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. I want you to look at this now in Revelation chapter 12. This is the account of the dragon and the woman. And the woman is Israel, not the church. It's Israel. The woman gave birth to the son. It is Israel who gave birth to the son. The man-child, Yeshua, not the church gave birth, all right? Get that theology straight. It is the woman. So look with me at verse 15. And the serpent, you know who that is, right? This is symbolic language. It's speaking about the enemy of all righteousness. And the serpent, making the kesha back to the Garden of Eden, right? That same one who deceived Eve is trying to deceive this woman. Are you seeing what's happening, right? Okay. And the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth. My God, this is figurative language. What does that mean? What is coming out of the mouth of the serpent? Well, he's also the father of lies. So what is coming out of his mouth? A flood of lies. Distorted truth. Lies. Outright lies and distorted truth. Poured out like a river out of the mouth after the woman. You see it 2,000 years and into today. All right? The assault against Israel. Where's that coming from? The serpent opened its mouth. Because he has found serpents in the nations who would just let that venom out. Let that venom out. Lashon hara, venom. Speak ill of Israel. Curse Israel. Because you're doing the work of the father of lies. So that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. That's the intention. Wipe Israel off the map. Get rid of them. Even in the church. Sing all the songs, but nothing concerning Israel. Preach all the messages. God, chapter 1, God made the heavens and the earth. Chapter 2, God made man. Chapter 3, Genesis, man fell. Matthew chapter 1, man needs a redeemer. We gone from Genesis chapter 3 to Matthew chapter 1. Nothing about the history of Israel. So we can have salvation, go to heaven, and have nothing to do with Israel. Who is behind that? Zero-sum mentality. And it's evil. It's an injustice. And it needs to be corrected. And it is being corrected. And we shall not faint nor grow weary until we bring justice forth to victory. Because God has his bruised reed that needs to be nurtured back to life. And God has his smoking flax that needs to be fanned back into flame. So look at what's happening now. Verse 16. But the earth helped the woman. Oh my God. The earth helped the woman. What do you mean the earth helped the woman? Who is the earth? In you shall all the families of the earth. So see what's happening here. You have to see it. The earth represents the people of the earth, the families of the earth who bore envy, perpetual enmity and hatred against Israel for all these years. But God is prophesying of a time, and now is when the earth would help rather than help themselves of Israel. They would come to the aid of Israel. The earth helped the woman. And when you become a disciple of the master, and when you stand up and rise up for Israel, you are fulfilling this prophecy. The earth is helping the woman, and the earth opened its mouth, oh my God, and drank up the river. We are able to take all of that and not let it affect us. You see, you can't help but what you hear, but you determine what you accept. You can hear all that lies against Israel. You can hear all that lies against Israel, but you don't accept it. It doesn't touch you because you're mature, you're strong, you're not operated by envy. So now you're in a position where God can use you to help. God is looking for somebody who will help. So drank up the river, which the dragon poured out of his mouth. So the dragon was enraged with Israel, the woman, and went off to make war with the rest of her children, Jewish and Messianic gentiles. And how are these children characterized? They keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Yeshua. They keep the commandments of God. Don't try to spiritualize it now. They keep the commandments of God. The children of the woman keep the commandments of God. She is our mother. So what would we do? Keep the commandments of God, because that's what the mother would have done. The mother would have taught her children Torah. And we've come to understand Yeshua. So we have the enemy deceiving those who set aside the commandments of God, just hold the testimony of Jesus. Let's tell me everything about Jesus. Jesus loved me, this I know. The Bible tells me so. I'm going to heaven when I die. Jesus saved me. Jesus loved me. Jesus. And no obedience. Grace is license to sin. No, nothing about obedience, because that is dead works. That is done away. But no, the devil has deceived you. You would keep the commandments of God and bear testimony to Yeshua. And there are those who would not keep the commandments of God and would have nothing to do with Yeshua. You see the error? And both camps are envious against each other. But when we move that envy, then we can help each other and recognize it's not either or, it's both. I'll give you my testimony, how for 10 years I was in a church that thought we were it. We had the commandments of God. And then God moved me to another church that was of the Spirit. And we were of the Spirit, speaking in tongues and raising and healing and all that wonderful thing. Wonderful. And then God spoke to me. It's not either or. Don't throw away the baby with the water. Understand the vision that I gave you. You stand in front of that dragon and you were not afraid because you were one of those children. I already predetermined what you're going to speak of, and you're going to stand before them and not be afraid. Whether you speak to a rabbi, whether you speak to a Gentile apostle, it does not matter. You will be able to bring together, reconciling them, keeping the commandments of God, not to be saved because you are saved, and you're bearing testimony to the Jewish Messiah who loved the Father and kept his Father's commandments. And you bear for true testimony, and not to a cosmic Christ, but to the true Jewish Jesus who did not abolish his Father's commandments. And he's not teaching you to do so. Who told you that the Shabbat is done away? Who told you that kosher is done away? Did you eat of the tree of knowledge that I told you not to eat of? Do you think that God sent his son to shed his blood for you to change your diet so that you could gobble on swine? Do you think that's how God is? The God who says, I change this not, would tell you, okay, bless, now, kill, and eat. Do you really think that is the Jesus of Scripture? You have believed another Jesus. You have believed the lie of the serpent. In the account of Corrie ten Boom, I came across this story. It says, in World War II Holland, Corrie ten Boom asked a visiting pastor to hide a Jewish mother, a newborn infant. He replies, no, definitely not. We could lose our lives for that Jewish child. Corrie writes, unseen by either of us, Father had appeared in the doorway. Give the child to me, Corrie, he said. Father held the baby close, his white beard brushing its cheek, looking into the little face with eyes as blue and innocent as the baby's. You say we could lose our lives for this child? I would consider that the greatest honor that would come to my family. The earth helps the woman. And so as we continue on, we want to show us that God is calling us to be fruitful. Psalm 128 says, your wife would be like a fruitful vine, children the olive plants. Who are the disciples? The disciples become the fruit that we bear. Parents, who are your first disciples? Your children, your fruit. And the fruit remains. The disciples remain faithful to the parents. You're not just followers, but disciples, disciplined ones. And you know that God has chosen you to fulfill that task. You see, the 12 were chosen and anointed so that their fruit would remain. And that's what's happening with us right now. We are their fruit that has remained because they hooked on to the branch. The branch, the 12 disciples hooked on the 12 apostles, hooked on to the vine, and through the vine, fruit is born. And God would have dealt with the 12 disciples where they were not. Listen, I want you to reread John 15 with that in mind and see that the fruit is not just the fruit of the Holy Spirit, but the fruit becomes the disciple himself. So we are not just bearing fruit, we are being the fruit. And God wants our fruit to remain, and God wants much fruit. In other words, he wants a whole family. All the nations of the earth be blessed because we've come to understand now that we are disciples. Go with me, oh my God, to Isaiah chapter 37. Isaiah chapter 37. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 31. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 31. We have a little insight from the prophets. It says this: the surviving remnant of the house of Judah, that's the Jewish people, will again take root downward in the land of Israel and bear fruit upward. Now, it's not by coincidence that Israel is exporting flowers to the nations. That's just an outworking on the natural level. But look at what's happening. They're going to bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem will go forth a remnant, and out of Mount Zion survivors. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Are you seeing this, brethren? This is like first fruits of Zion. The first fruits of Israel became the disciples, the 12 that came out from Jerusalem and flooded the whole earth with fruit. When we understand this, we don't fight against that. He said, look, oh my God, look at it, the surviving remnant. God is going to raise up a remnant from within the Jewish community who would recognize Yeshua as the vine, lock into the branch, and would begin to bear fruit. And their fruit will go to the ends of the earth. You and I are the fruit. First fruits of Zion. Think about that ministry. First fruits of Zion. Be comfortable with allowing there to be a first fruit of Zion. Because if there's a first fruit of Zion, oh my God, go with me to chapter 27, verse 6. Take it down, Gentiles. Quiet, quiet, quiet. God is at work. In Isaiah chapter 27, verse 6. In the days to come, Jacob will take root, Israel will blossom and sprout, and they will fill the whole world with fruit. How is that going to happen? When the Gentiles put away envy and become fruit. Because we've given prominence, took the low place. Don't think of ourselves as more important. Put back in our place because we are humiliated because someone more important than you is here. You understand what I'm saying? Right? And now you look what's happening. So love first fruits of Zion and then fruits from the nations. Maintain God's protocol. So as we read this, I want to go with me to John chapter 17. You see, this is exciting when you begin to see God at work and you could see what he's doing. In John chapter 17, our master said this from verse 18. As you sent me into the world, I also have sent them into the world. For their sake, you notice he sent the 12. For their sake, the sake of the 12, I sanctify myself, the vine, that they themselves also may be sanctified in truth. If they're connected, the branch. I do not ask on behalf of these alone. I'm not asking on behalf of these 12 Jewish disciples tonight as we partake of the Passover, but for those, oh my God, who would believe in me through their word. Who are those? Us. Yeshua is on that night looking down into time and seeing you and I. We are those who have come to believe because we have read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Through their word, we have become the fruit that they have borne, and we remain. And thousands of years, that fruit still remains because God has charged them. You ask of me, I will give you the nations as an inheritance. You pray along with the vine, oh my God, and the Father, the vine dresser, who's looking at the vine and looking at the branches and looking at the fruit, will begin to fulfill this word. These Jewish people and those become one. Or for these and those to become one, which is what he said, that they all may be one, Echad, even as you, Father, I in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me, your son, the Jewish Messiah, the Jewish Jesus, the Messiah of Israel, sent to gather fruit from the world. In Romans chapter 1, I want you to really bring this home, because if you remember, this is what God is saying to us. Romans chapter 1, verse 13, he says, Paul is saying, he said, listen, I do not want you to be unaware, brethren, that often I have planned to come to you. This is Paul going to the Gentiles, to you, and have been prevented so far, so that I may obtain what? Some fruit among you also, even as among the rest of the Gentiles. So Paul is saying, I'm coming to you because I want to obtain some fruit. You are my fruit. You disciples have been bearing fruit and you're being the fruit. I want to be fruitful for the master. Why should I appear before him empty-handed? I want fruit to appear placed before the master. Go with me to Leviticus 19. This Torah portion, Leviticus chapter 19. We pick it up something here, Leviticus chapter 19. There is an interesting encounter that is given here. Leviticus chapter 19 from verse 23. The Messiah tells Israel, when you enter the land of Israel, after the 40 years of wandering, when you enter the land and plant all kinds of trees for food, then you shall count their fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you. It shall not be eaten. But in the 4th year, all its fruit shall be holy, an offering of praise to Adonai. In the 5th year, you are to eat of its fruit, that its yield may increase to you. I am Adonai, your God. Now, I want you to consider that at this stage about 3 years forbidden, and then 4th year, and then 5th year. And I want you to make a connection now with me to James chapter 5. Go with me to James chapter 5. James chapter 5 from verse 7. Therefore, James chapter 5 verse 7. Therefore, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious produce of the soil, being patient about it until it gets the early and late rains. So here is the farmer waiting for the produce, waiting for the fruit. That's what God is doing. And God began to show us quite early in our ministry to consider this. He said, I'm going to send you disciples, and don't expect fruit overnight. You see, the first 3 years of those who come and join with you, it's forbidden. Don't have any high expectations concerning them. They're still maturing. The 4th year, they're now becoming a praise to God. In the 5th year, hopefully by God's grace, you have been obedient, and now I can eat of the fruit because I'm eating along with my Messiah. God said, learn to be a steward and not an owner. You see, the vine dresser keenly watches the branch. The branch gets nothing, brethren. The fruit, the needy gets the fruit. The branch produces for the fruit. This ministry I've given to you is not for you. It is to bear fruit. And the needy gets the fruit. The needy becomes the fruit. So I will send you some Talmudi, and they will not be able to help you. That's first 3 years. They will not be able to help you. Hopefully, if they connect with me, then they will be in the 4th year become a praise. And I've seen this. We have seen this worked out over the years. The old vine, the old life cannot be grafted in. Got to get rid of that. And if it's not gotten rid of, then the whole process will have to go again and again. We don't want no false fruit. We want to bring fruit to maturity. In Luke chapter 8, we begin to see this. Luke chapter 8. Go with me to Luke chapter 8. Now these things will begin to make sense. Luke chapter 8, verse 14. You have the 4 types of disciples. Disciples I will send to you, and the enemy snatched the word out of their mind. Disciples who would love this Jewish Messiah thing, love this Hebrew words, love when kippah and tzitzit. They're excited about that because we now become the chosen, arrogance and foolishness. And when pressure comes, I done with that. Who is Jesus? Who is Rav? And then some disciples that come, they love this thing, but choked by worries and cares and riches. So no Bible study, no prayer. And they look at it, they don't bring forth fruit to maturity. Not just bearing fruit, they themselves as fruit don't come to maturity. But the seed in the good soil, these are the ones who have heard the word. Notice, they didn't just read the scriptures, they heard the word speaking to them. Those are the ones who bring forth fruit to maturity. Are you seeing that, brethren? The ones who stay and remain with us, In all their fumbling, the word is speaking to them. They have heard the word. Jesus himself, Yeshua, the word becomes flesh, speaking to them. So it's not just reading the scriptures. It's not just impressing you with knowing the scriptures. The word has looked into your life and spoken to you. So I asked myself, as I look, my Father, my God, the fruit. And now I understand what is happening now. That I'm praying and interceding for the fruit to come to maturity. God said at least after 5 years they should have come to maturity. But when you look and you see 15 years, beloved, and fruit still in the bud stage. Oh my God. May God help us. Interceding all night for the fruit to come to maturity. For the fruit forthright. And by the fruit, you know them. You know they're not studying. You know they're not fasting. You know they're not zealous for the kingdom. But the vine dresser, ever hopeful, tries to lift them up. Connect them to the vine again. So that they won't need to be cast away. So that this fruit come to maturity. That I can hear the voice of the master in people. That we can recognize this arrogance and this foolishness and this envy and this sexual immorality and robbing God by not paying tithes and bringing the offering. All of that. The fruit is forthright. Not fruit to maturity. You're listening to hear the voice of the master where somebody could tell you that you're wrong and you answer not a word. You're looking to hear that. And you're watching, waiting for the husbandman desires the fruit. But all he gets is leaves. And God has to do the pruning. Because God said, I'm going to turn the spears into pruning hooks. So those who you think are against you, spears, they become pruning hooks because I'm going to use them to prune you. Now you start to bear fruit, we'll now have to prune you. I have to prune you, Angus and daughter, I have to prune you. See that's happening first so that the fruit could begin to bear. So it's a work happening in us first. And when you grow up, then the branch now bears fruit and the fruit itself grows up as it were to become a branch to go and bear fruit. So what have you been called to? To be fruitful. Where are your fruit? If you're a branch now, where are your fruit? Who have you discipled since you came to know the Messiah? Have you come to him and said, you are a hard man? I have nobody impacted by my life. Is there no one who could say, I love Yeshua because I'm followed this person or that person? Where are the fruit? 35 years at El Dorado West Secondary, I prayed for heaven, splitting, earth shaking experiences. And I had a couple of them, but in my last couple of days, I said, Lord, whatever you didn't do for 35 years in these last couple of days, do it for me. And I left, and I didn't have that earth shaking, heaven rending experience. But when I left, and at the assembly, I began to hear how my principal and my colleagues, past and present, begin to speak about me. And one that touched my heart, a former one who never knew me, said, oh my God, I wished that Mr. Marshall would have been my teacher. I would have known him, this caliber of the man. I wish that that would have been so. Now I begin to understand, my God, I am praying for these things, but then God whispered to me, my son, oh my God, you are like Moses who did not know that his face was shining. I've been talking to you and your face have been shining and you didn't see it, but others saw it and they recognized God in their midst. What you want.